Okay, starting with appetite. Greg and I met at Dartington College of Arts in 1997. We actually met at a party, sort of social gathering, and two friends introduced us, and we kind of, amongst the conversation, we started telling a joke that we sort of kept finishing the end of, and then the other one would finish it again, and then the other one would finish it again, and that continued for most of the night until a lot of people had gone home. And then we went home, we walked home, and we stopped at my flat, and I went in and boiled 2 eggs. I cut them in half, put them on a plate, put some mayonnaise on top, a little bit of cayenne pepper, and called it breakfast. And after that delicious meal, we decided to make a piece of performance together. We made a piece called On Everest, which was the piece that we graduated with from our degrees. In the piece, it's a 1-hour piece where an audience sits and watches it. In the piece, there's a white line running through the studio, cutting through the audience bank. Greg sits in that chair for most of it. He also does some dancing. Whilst I move up and down the white line, I start by walking, and I end up running for the last sort of 20 minutes of the piece or more. The attempt in the piece is to climb Mount Everest. The line on the floor is 1/300th the height of the mountain, and we say that if we pass up and down that line 300 times during the hour, then we reach the summit of the mountain. We have the summit there. There's a little kind of hoop of fake snow, and we have a champagne book launch at the top. We launch a booklet of the text that Greg reads. He sits on a chair in a paddling pool, again full of fake snow, and reads the text. A long quasi-academic text, a presentation about mountaineering, about loss, about the attempt of climbing a mountain, about Everest itself, about the room that we're sitting in and performing the piece. It was kind of inspired by a story we heard about mountaineers and the effect of mountaineering, the effect of altitude sickness actually. And it sort of creates in the brain a regression. Climbers start to think about other places whilst they're on the mountain. They forget all about climbing a mountain in some cases, and they sit down on a rock and they just think about what they've left behind, the people they've left behind, the places they've left behind, the times that have happened before this expedition. This regression takes them back into their life. The effects of being on the mountain forces them back into their life, and we quite like this mixing of places, that you can go to this very extreme place, Everest, the highest place, and somehow think about everywhere else but that mountain, the place where you stand. And I think, why we're attracted actually to making performance, to making live work, is that it really responds to the place where we are, the here and now. We're in this moment together, the people gathered here, the performers, it's all happening in time together. So we like this effect of mountaineering and how we might try to place that in a performance. In fact, the effect of me trying to cover the distance of Everest somehow puts me in the state of not being able to do it. I get exhausted. I'm asked to read the quotations for the paper, the footnotes and quotations of this academic paper, but it's a real problem to do it because I'm just sweating and exhausted. So really simple things become very difficult, as they would on a mountain. Dragging the pole. We did most of the dragging at night. This is going from the shopping centre. Actually, Molly, do you think you could play a little tune to this? There's no sound to this bit. Maybe you can play something that's about kind of going forward. Maybe has a sense of also kind of looking back. Probably the point to say is there's a couple of reasons why we dressed as cowboys for this particular piece. There was that sense that we were going to turn up in a town that we didn't know, that we weren't from, and then at the end of a journey present a kind of history of the town, or speak with some authority about the place. We thought this was a slightly, we have this term in the UK, when someone's a cowboy, it means that they're not quite kind of correct. And they're not, sometimes you get cowboy builders, which you say they can do things, but they're not really qualified. So we thought we were sort of cowboy historians in a way, cowboy sociologists maybe. So that's one reason why we took on the cowboy image. Another reason is because in that part of the UK, in that town in the east of the UK, line dancing and country and western culture is quite popular. People go out of an evening to social events and dance together. They dance line dancing, country dancing together. And so we thought by dressing as cowboys, maybe we'd tease out some of the people in their everyday lives who weren't necessarily wearing their country and western attire that they'd wear on a Friday and Saturday night. But we may tease them out off the high streets in Colchester. And we did. We were interested by this, and so when we were offered a gallery for a day for 12 hours, some months later, we said that we would just present this line dance as a durational piece for the time we were allowed in the gallery. We said we'd do it 12 hours. We asked the gallery how long we had. They said 12 hours, so we started at noon and ended at midnight. We've performed the piece in different places, so some of these images are for different places. We wear blindfolds, and we do it in silence, and we just listen to each other's footsteps to keep time. We thought like a kind of tape loop that slowly disintegrates over time, degrades until you can't sort of hear what the original sound recording was. This would happen to the dance as well, that we would become too tired to do it, and that the dance would just disintegrate and we'd become these kind of fragile, shuffling cowboys. Sort of, the heroic, cinematic, macho image of the cowboy becomes this very pathetic, kind of bent, tired character. We do become tired, but it doesn't totally go away, the dance. Because we listen to each other's footsteps, we can keep in perfect time. of each other. And because it is quite a simple dance, quite a low level activity actually, we managed to pass the 12 hours doing the dance. This is us in Melbourne doing it outside. Well, this is the breakfast that I had before starting the piece in Melbourne. A place called Blue Train Cafe. Like a hearty breakfast, I knew it'd have to last me through the time. What we think is about halfway, we stop and eat pizza and drink Pepsi. It's part of the score of the piece. So people coming to find the piece, to see the two dancing cowboys, may turn up at the time when we're eating pizza and drinking Pepsi. We keep our blindfolds on. Here we're kind of feeding ourselves. Sometimes people stay with us and they hand the food to us, they kind of care for us and tend to us. Actually, during this time, you can't really see it. I think there's one of the boys here. During this time in Melbourne, two young men who had been into the piece during the daytime carried on dancing for us. They continued the dance. People come along and learn the dance during the 12 hours, probably because there's nothing else to do. They hang around and they learn the dance. And during the time in Melbourne when we were eating, these two young men continued the dance while we ate. Then when we'd finished, we got up, we listened, we could hear their footsteps, and we joined back into their dance with them. After performing the piece in Berlin, an art student asked us, where does the dance go? And that was a difficult question to answer after 12 hours of dancing. Where does the dance go? We said, we don't know. Maybe our legs ache. Maybe we've got specific memories of what happened. We're not sure where the dance goes when it's finished. And then we unpacked our bags after being in Berlin, and we could see on our shirts that there was a little mark, a salt mark, where we had sweated during the performance. It left this, where the sweat had dried, it left this salty residue. There's a piece, it's a bit like a mountain. So maybe we thought that's where the dance goes. Maybe it's contained in sweat. Maybe the sweat carries the dance into our clothes. So with this in mind, we started a new series of pieces based around water and the hydrological cycle, and our sweat being part of that cycle. We were on a residency in an old mill building. Here's me hanging out of a kind of skylight in the ceiling of the mill. When we arrived in the room, we were going to be in the room for a week. The residency was for a week. The room was leaking. There was water coming through the ceiling. Rain was coming through. It left marks on the ceiling. And there was a number of buckets and pots that the person who owned the mill had put out. There's some of the marks. These look like a bit like clouds, we thought. And we started to, let's go back to buckets. Yeah, we started to tend for the buckets. We had to empty them in the night time because we were getting full up because it was continually raining outside. And we had to name them. We found a little system of naming them with these little cards. So when we could refer to what one we'd emptied during the night time, so we'd know which one it was. Sometimes we'd name them different things. And with the suggestion that water was in a cycle, we would maybe call one of the little buckets Lake Michigan, or call one of the buckets 1987, because maybe this water that was in the buckets contained previous waters from previous times, rain that fell during 1987, some of the contents of Lake Michigan, some of Bruce Springsteen's sweat. So we started a series of performances. I'll just run through these. After that residency in the mill, where we would spend time in a city walking and collecting water. Here we are in London. We would collect water in bags, wearing all of these clothes, these macks, these kind of long kind of fisherman's capes, wearing lots and lots of layers of clothing. The ambition of these pieces was to turn the water that we collected in the daytime into clouds, into steam, using our body heat. Here's the kind of end of one of those performances, where we've got hot during the daytime from making a walk to the River Thames and back in London, wearing all the clothes. And in the evening we meet with an audience, we distribute the water, we throw it over our bodies after we've taken our tops off, and we try to steam the water back into the hydrological cycle. Sometimes we had to carry the water in barrels. Sometimes we made a kind of wet line. Here we are in Chicago. We have these bags that we use for collecting water that had holes in the bottom. Now, the ambition of these pieces were to make clouds, really, but in terms of meeting an audience in the evening and presenting a performance, a show, I guess we used a similar kind of tactic of presenting a report or a dispatch that we used in Totem or we used in 24/4. I think this is common across all of our work, that we use this kind of structure or this idea of a report about what's happened, about the day that's just happened, about the events, about stories we've heard. And we would place it into a list, just a numbered list, very available, simple form for organising material, sometimes very disparate and kind of different material. So I'll just read one of the texts from the performances.